There are views, magnificent views, and then there are views that put every single superlative through the shredder. I'm standing on Trundle Hill, an ancient, very ancient, Iron Age hill fort, overlooking thousands and thousands of acres of what you could only describe as the epitome of the English countryside. And what it makes this place special for us, is it has Goodwood Racecourse at its very heart, and at the heart of the Duke of Richmond's 12,000 acre estate. Here on Trundle Hill was where the ordinary folk used to come and watch the racing, because Goodwood has always had this country house party air, and the great and good would be down there, and the people, normal people who went to work for a living, would be up here. And during the Wakes weeks up in the north, Wakes weeks when the big factories and mills shut for summer holiday and everyone went on holiday, a lot of people come down from the north. This is before the days of package holidays and going abroad in the 1960s. And they'd be at the coastal resorts like Bognor Regis and other places strung along the sea, which lies 4 miles over there. And they'd come racing here up on Trundle Hill, and there'd be loads of bookies, and it was a picnic for the working folk who needed a break. And of course, that was only just in about the 50s. You had things like paid holidays. You just got lobbed out the factory for a week and told to amuse yourself. But this racecourse, and just take it in, that strip of verdant green in this most arid and mercilessly hot summers, this racecourse is a fabulous spectacle. It's a difficult place to ride. You get more traffic troubles than you get on the Paris périphérique, but it has this absolutely timeless quality, because you can look out from the stands, and for 2, 3, 4 miles, I think there's only one house you can see. This is the old rural Britain. And though Goodwood Racecourse, and of course glorious Goodwood most of all, is the pounding heart of this place, Goodwood's also home to a famous motor racing circuit, and they hold the Festival of Speed here and the Goodwood Revival, and it was a Formula One track until, if you like, the cars became too powerful for it. And it was the site of one of the most famous racing accidents of all time, when Stirling Moss in 1962 went into an earth bank at 100 miles an hour. No seat belts or anything like that in those days. It took 45 minutes to cut him out, and that effectively ended his career. And no longer is Goodwood Formula One, but it's still massively used and hugely popular because it's a great historic place. There used to be a racing track at Aintree of all places as well. There's an aerodrome here, and this was a huge area in the Battle of Britain. West Hampton under the hill, Tangmere a couple of miles up the road, lots of Hurricanes and Spitfires, and they were some of the busiest squadrons in the war, and they suffered some terrific losses here, I'm afraid. And eventually things like the command posts and everything were housed in schools in Chichester and everything, as the Stukas came over and bombed the living daylights out of our airfields. But it's also home to a curiosity, a racing curiosity. And I'm going to take you down the hill and show you something that changed the face of racing forever. Back in the 1800s, there were two great reforming figures on the turf, and one was the fabulously wealthy Lord George Bentinck, and he was the powerhouse behind persuading the Duke of Richmond to build this racecourse here. And he had other innovations here. Start times, that was new. Enclosures, and that allowed women to come to the races really for the first time, or respectable women, shall we say, because they could be, if you like, protected from the roughnecks and roues and whatever that populated the racecourse back in their day. And also the start. The start was a no-holds-barred affair. In one ledger early in the century, in order to get the favourite Mameluke beat, they managed to engineer 27 full starts till the thing basically was beaten before it ran. Well, Bentinck, he rationalised the start, but he's not just an angel, he was a massive hypocrite. He loved a gamble, so he'd go and actually start some of the races and sort of orchestrate it for his own benefit. But he had one piece of genius preserved here at Goodwood, and it is this humble wagon wheel. Back in the 1830s, Bentinck had a horse called Ellis in the St Leger, which was a good thing. Then horses had to walk to the races. Dogster's a good 200 miles from Goodwood. The layers in London knew that Ellis was still on the Goodwood estate. It could not possibly, with 5 days to go to the Leger, get to Donny and run. So Bentinck was able to back it at 12-1, which he did in absolutely regal style. What he'd done in secret was build the first ever horse box. And it was padded inside and drawn by a team of horses, and he had teams of horses all the way from here and deepest Sussex, all the way up to Yorkshire. Instead of taking a fortnight to walk there, Ellis got there in 3 days, perfectly refreshed, and bolted up in the Leger. And this priceless object is the last surviving wagon wheel from the first ever horse box. A brilliant man, Bentinck. He was kind of Disraeli's mentor. He got out the turf early, and he died young actually, but he sold his horses here at Goodwood, and the next year Surplus won the Derby, one of his horses. And he was sitting in the House of Commons library when he gave out this spectacular groan just as Benjamin Disraeli walked into the room. And Bentinck said, "All my life I've been trying to win the Derby. Do you know what the Derby is, Mr. Disraeli?" "Yes, my lord. It is the blue riband of the turf." And that was the first time that famous expression was ever used. Let's face it, there is a certain practiced snootiness about Goodwood and that garden party atmosphere, etc. But it's also a rock and roll day out for huge numbers of coaches down from London along the south coast. And although it is a place owned by the upper reaches of the aristocracy, the last Duke of Richmond, the 10th Duke, who died last year aged 87, was a rather splendid fellow. He was a very liberal man by outlook and a very much an opponent of the apartheid regime in South Africa. And in the early 60s, he did something almost unknown. He adopted 2 children of mixed race, black father, white mother, and raised them as his own. It was rare, but in the zones of society in which he operated, it caused a scandal. But I think it was an absolutely noble and marvellous thing to do, an attitude changer. Behind me, the paddock where they go round left-handed, of course, here. Next week we'll house runners for the Group 1s, the Sussex, the Nassau, the Goodwood Cup, and of course that great handicap sprint, the Stewards Cup. And they market the place heavily on Pimm's and Panama hats. Well, in the mid-1800s, a man called James Pym, who was an oyster bar owner, decided to make a fruit cup for his patrons, and he made Pimm's #1. And there were, and I can remember, Pimm's #2, which was Scotch whisky, Pimm's #3, brandy, Pimm's #4, rum, #5, rye whisky, and #6 is the only other one made other than #1, which everyone knows is gin, although it's weaker mixed than it used to be, always put a gin in it. They make the vodka one, #6, but in tiny quantities, and I'd never been able to find it or buy it. And Panama hats, well, of course, they shouldn't be called Panama hats at all. A man called Manuel Alfaro in 1835 went to Ecuador, where the finest straw was and the most skilled weavers to make these hats. But he wanted them to be exported, and they all went out through Panama. So they became associated with Panama when the gold rush in California came. A lot of the workers, the fortune seekers, went through Panama on their way up to California, and they were hats bought in Panama, but actually they should be called Ecuadors. You learn something every day. Specialist subjects, horse racing, and a refreshing drink. Racecourses don't hibernate, and particularly for a huge meeting like this, the preparations are mind-boggling. Cop this thing, get one of these for home. This is a mix of aggregates and resin, and this guy's machine just smooths it off and makes it an absolute perfect finish. And he's got the whole of here, I think 50 yards of it to do, well, before they go to the post on Tuesday. But everywhere there's sound systems, televisions, the bars are being constructed, there's diggers in here, and you think, this is never going to be ready in time. But it will be. It will be seamless, and Goodwood will go on like some serene swan. But this is all the paddling that goes on in the week before, and the place will be at its best. And they don't call it glorious for nothing.